Hi guys, today I'm going to give you my review of Marvel's new Disney Plus show, Loki, and we'll get to that right after this. I've been using Coinbase.com and the Coinbase app for cryptocurrency for about 2 years now, which makes it really easy and safe to buy, sell, and store digital currency like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Sign up now and use my link at christiannerdsunite.com/Coinbase and get $10 of free Bitcoin when you buy or sell at least $100 worth of digital currency. Join 43 million other people who buy, sell, and manage their crypto on the world's most trusted crypto exchange. Check it out at christiannerdsunite.com/Coinbase. And now, back to the show. Today, we're talking all about Loki. It's the new MCU show on Disney Plus. It's just released last Wednesday, and if you're listening to this on release day, episode 2 is going to drop tomorrow. So I'm super excited about it. I've really enjoyed the show so far, and I want to talk about it. But before we get there, before we get started, let's do a little scripture like we usually do. Let's start with Psalm 7, 14 through 17. And this is speaking of the wicked. Behold, he traveleth with iniquity, and hath conceived mischief, and brought forth falsehood. He made a pit and digged it, and is fallen into the ditch which he made. His mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down upon his own pate. And Psalm 28, 1 through 3. Upon thee I will cry, O Lord my rock. Be not silent to me, lest if thou be silent to me, I become like them that go down into the pit. Hear the voice of my supplications, when I cry unto thee, when I lift up my hands toward thy holy oracle. Draw me not away into the wicked, and with the workers of iniquity, which speak peace to their neighbors, but mischief in their own hearts. Okay, both of these scriptures use the word mischief. And today we're looking at Loki, and in Marvel, he calls himself the god of mischief. In some versions of the Bible, those words are translated a little differently. In the U.S., we hear the word mischief, and we think of someone who's up to something, but maybe it's bad, but maybe it's not that bad. Well, other Bible versions translate this word much more strongly as malice or even evil. So mischief in certain versions of the Bible, we're not just talking about somebody who, moves your cup so you can't find it, or who eats your lunch out of the lunchroom. We're talking about something much more substantial. Well, in the Marvel Universe, we have Loki, who has been everything from a pure evil villain to misunderstood and mistreated stepchild to an anti-hero. But he's always depicted in the MCU as in it for himself. Very selfish, even when he ends up doing something heroic. So let's look at the show, and this is your spoiler warning right now. So just be aware, if you don't want any spoilers about Loki, you might want to wait to listen to this episode. I will tell you this, I am only going to focus on episode 1. So if you've already seen that, you're safe. I am going to speculate about a couple of things at the end, and they are pure speculation. I don't have any crystal ball that tells me this is what's going to happen, but I feel like this is what's going to happen. And generally my prognostications have failed epically. So let's go on. What is Loki? So it's a 6-episode series on Disney Plus, set in the MCU with the character Loki, and that's Thor's brother, as the main character. Now, this is a time-hopping, multi-dimensional kind of adventure. It's a bit of a manhunt, something akin to a murder mystery, but not exactly. It's a mystery as to who they're hunting, but it is some kind of manhunt. So that's kind of the premise of the show. And Loki gets involved in this. And we're going to see Loki played once again by Tom Hiddleston. He does an amazing job as this character. We see a new person. We see Owen Wilson, who's a great actor, done some amazing work, as playing a character named Mobius. And if you actually look him up, he is named Mobius M. Mobius. So, that gives you some clues that this is a little odd and a little weird. So far, my previous expectations of what I thought this was going to be have been pretty wrong. I was envisioning kind of a Quantum Leap meets the MCU. It does not look like that's what we're going to get. It does look like we're going to get time hopping, but it looks like Loki will be Loki. He is not going to be representing other people. At least that's not the way it looks like at this point. It is just going to be straight up Loki looking for people. So first, let's look at Loki's character. We are looking at not the Loki that we saw die at the beginning of Endgame. This is a different Loki. This is the Loki that we saw at the end of the very first Avengers movie almost 10 years ago. So this is a Loki that has not gone through all of the redemption arc that he has experienced, and we see a lot of this early Loki kind of sped up in the first few minutes of the show, kind of a recap of what happened in the Avengers and what happened in Endgame. So we definitely have a different kind of Loki. We have the original Loki after his first failure against Earth. That's who we're dealing with. Literally no time has passed from when Loki gets the Tesseract and he uses it to vanish in the middle of Endgame. So that scene in Endgame pretty much was only there to set up this show. So they quickly introduce a whole new group called the TVA, the Time Variance Authority. The Time Variance Authority was created by 3 aliens that are called the Timekeepers. They are the guardians of the sacred timeline. They're kind of time cops. They go around fixing the timeline and nabbing people who have broken the timeline in some way. It's a mix of super advanced technology and something that looks like the 1960s. So it is a weird, kitschy look that the show has. I kind of like it. It's kind of fun. It is definitely beautifully shot. It is well produced. It looks great. It is Marvel quality. So be assured there. So next, we have this idea of the sacred timeline, basically an approved timeline, kind of. Owen Wilson's character Mobius goes through it and says he wouldn't say, things that were approved or things that were not approved, but he doesn't really go into exactly what the sacred timeline is. But Loki basically makes fun of the idea of the sacred timeline. He makes fun of the idea of the TVA even existing, which is a little weird since Loki himself is a, little g god that some people don't believe in. So we have a myth making fun of a myth, finding out that they're both real. So that's kind of a weird little meta thing going on there. Power means very little to the Time Variance Authority. They have some sort of thing that basically removes all magic from the area. And because there's no magic, Loki basically can't do any of his mischievous tricks. No shape shifting, no escape artist work. He's not able to do any of the things he's usually able to do. In fact, its power means so little to them that Infinity Stones are used as paperweights. They don't have any power in this particular area. At one point, we actually see a drawer with a bunch of random things. It seems random, but we see things that we see a Honus Wagner baseball card. It's basically the most expensive baseball card in the world. We see multiple Infinity Stones, and I'm not talking about multiple like, the 6. We're talking like, there's like 15 or 20 of those suckers in there. We see a poker chip. We see a war medal. We also see a Christian cross. And, but it is apparent from this drawer that whatever powers that be, that the Timekeepers and the Time Variance Authority are well outside of that existence. Now, there's also a lot of light humor and some serious ideas floated throughout the show. Now, think of the light humor. I mean, this is a Loki show, so it is going to be little Thor-like, and Thor has some lighthearted humor, and it is standard Marvel to have some lighthearted humor, but I think there's probably more humor here than in some other shows we've seen. So that is kind of fun. It makes it feel like this is something that's happening, and sometimes there are funny things that happen in life, and these are going to happen, and this is going to be funny at the time. But we're also going to talk about some deep, serious things. So we see Loki pretty close to the beginning of the show. We see Loki almost immediately arrested by the TVA, and we start finding out more about their existence. We now find that Loki is powerless. So is the Tesseract. We find out that they oversee this sacred timeline, that Nexus events are a real thing, and that Nexus events cause the timeline to split, and that the Time Variance Authority is there to fix those Nexus events to bring the timeline back into stream. There's a nice nod to Arthur C. Clarke's quote from Profiles of the Future. His quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And that's kind of been thrown around a little bit in the MCU in the past. And it's kind of hinted at here when Loki says, "I thought there was no magic here," when he looks out at the whole of the TVA, and Morbius replies, "There isn't." So it is definitely a hint to that idea, that the TVA is so advanced technologically that even Loki thinks it's magic. Now, Mobius is on the hunt for some time-hopping bad guy, and we learn this pretty early on in the show. Now, is this the big bad of the show? This is a big question, and it always comes up in these MCU shows. Who is the real big bad of the show? And I'm here to tell you, I'm not positive. I will give you some ideas at the end of what I think could happen. But is this person that Mobius is hunting really going to be the big bad? I'm not sure. So there are some references that are also made to Nightmare as a department. And, that's kind of a nod to the character Nightmare, who has been rumored to be coming to the MCU for a long time and is suspected to be the bad guy for the Doctor Strange movie that's going to be coming up. Or they may just be adding fuel to the fire here, just for fun. Now, Mobius walks Loki through some of his history and asks what his real end game is. What is the purpose of Loki? And, that is a reference to, number one, the episode name, Glorious Purpose. And it's also a reference to his speech in the original Avengers movie, talking about his glorious purpose. Now, Loki does not really seem to have a plan as he's talking through this. He has this plan of conquer, but once he's conquered, Earth? He's, what's next? Space? Well, what's after that? What is your end game? And Loki doesn't seem to have a clear picture of what's enough, or even if there is an enough, or if there's a reason to even think about that. It definitely starts him thinking down this road of, why do I do what I do? And that is definitely a big theme here. There's another thing that's thrown out by Mobius, that Loki only trusts himself. Now, this becomes pretty important here in just a few moments. So remember that. Loki only trusts himself. So Mobius takes him through some of his biggest failures and some of his biggest successes, showing clips from, multiple MCU movies, especially the first Avengers movie. Eventually, he watches basically everything that was important to him in the MCU. His father's acceptance of him, his working with Thor eventually, the death of his own mother, and even his own heroic death. These are all things he has not yet experienced, but that he is supposed to experience. So Loki's not believing that these things are real. He eventually does accept them. And Mobius finally comes to the point of asking him, why do you like hurting people? Finally, at a poignant moment, Loki comes to this statement that I don't enjoy hurting people. I do it because I had to. It's part of the illusion that he's creating. It feels like Mobius is trying to get Loki to the end of his redemption arc as quickly as possible through psychology. Since we have a Loki that hasn't experienced any of those things, Mobius has to get him to that point of being heroic in a different way. And one of the ways he does is by showing him all of these things that he should have experienced. Mobius eventually tells us right at the end, or very near the end of the episode, that the person that Loki is supposed to help locate is himself. So not only do we have a Loki variant that we're dealing with here, we have another Loki variant that he will be hunting down. So this becomes something of a quandary. How do you go about finding yourself? That is, it looks like that is where this show is going. Now, this other Loki, this other variant, remember that idea I told you earlier, he only trusts himself. So who is better to go hunting for Loki than another Loki? Is it a different Loki? Is it the same Loki in a different timeline? Is it Loki at a different time? Is it a Loki that was earlier? These are questions that need to be asked. We do have some hints. Now, there is a document that shows up at one point, and that document lists Loki's gender as fluid. Now, that could be a comment to current social trends, but I think in this instance, it's going to be an actual plot device. A little bit different than social trends. I don't think we're going to see a true gender bender change of sex from one to the other, but I do expect us to see a female Loki at some point. I think Loki will meet himself as a female Loki, and that has been something that has happened in the comic books. The Norse mythology has had Loki as both male and female, depending on the time period. And a lot of people are hinting that Sophia Di Martino will be playing the Lady Loki. So expect that to happen. Along with that, there is another character that IMDb lists, no name for, but has an actor attached, a pretty significant actor. We have Richard E. Grant. And much speculation is saying that Richard E. Grant is going to play something called Classic Loki. So what is Classic Loki? Is that going to be a classic Loki, like an old Loki? Is that going to be a closer to Norse mythology Loki? What does this classic Loki really mean? But so at this point, we're kind of expecting to see at least 3 different Lokis. Could we eventually see a council of Lokis? Now, if you're a Marvel fan, if you've read the comics, you might be familiar with the idea of the Council of Richards. The Reed Richards of the multiverse get together and deal with problems that are too big for any single Reed Richards to deal with. So could we see a council of Lokis in that same way? I'm not sure that's where we're going, but that's kind of interesting idea. And there's some meta things there going on because there is a person that is working on this show that is from Rick and Morty, and at one point there is a council of Mortys, basically, which is kind of meta, making fun of Marvel. And then so this person is on the Loki show, so now we're going to make fun of that on top of it. So there's some weird things there. I don't know if all that's real, but it's kind of interesting to think about it. Now, we get to the very last scene, and we see title pop up on the screen, 1858, Salina, Oklahoma. Now, I'm from Oklahoma. I know where Salina is. Now, I think it's interesting they did say Oklahoma. In 1858, it actually wouldn't have been called Oklahoma. So my guess is somebody got a little more politically correct because they didn't feel comfortable with calling it Indian Territory, which is what it would have been called. So it still was called Salina. It was a town in 1858. It just technically wasn't Oklahoma yet. But that's neither here nor there, but it's kind of interesting. Either way, we see a cloaked figure who we presume is the Loki that we're hunting for. Cloaked and shadowed, so we don't see a face. We don't know if this might be the female Loki. We don't know if this might be the classic Loki or some other Loki. But that is something that we do see there, and it's presented to us as though this is the big bad for the show. Now, in the previous MCU shows, it's been pretty clear we had one simple big bad, and then we had somebody else who was kind of an annoyance bad. We had WandaVision, we had the big bad was really Agatha, and then we had the kind of annoying bad who was the director of S.W.O.R.D. Then we have, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where we have the big bad being the Flag Smashers. And then we kind of have the sub bad of John Walker, who is kind of bad and gets, kind of a redemption arc. So that's kind of the thing that's been going. So I'm wondering if we're going to see something like that here. Whether we have a big bad, that's for sure, and then we have these little bads that are going to run around from time to time. Now, somebody to keep an eye on. I think this is interesting. Gugu Mbatha-Raw is playing Ravonna Renslayer. Now, this is an actual name in the show. She is the judge that Loki comes in front of. Now, Renslayer in the comics is an entirely different character, but she does kind of become important for some things that are happening in the MCU. So keep an eye on this character. She is listed as being in all 6 episodes, so it's possible her part may be larger than we expect. Now, in the comics, Renslayer is a 40th century princess. She later becomes an assassin. She becomes a Marvel character of her own right. In the comics, she's very closely tied with Kang the Conqueror in an unrequited love sort of way. In Loki, as I said, she's a judge. Now, we've already heard that Jonathan Majors has been cast to portray Kang the Conqueror in the new Ant-Man and the Wasp movie, Ant-Man 3, basically. And so is it possible we will see him come into Loki since we have Renslayer? That is an interesting conjecture. Or did they just pull a name they needed, a good name, and they said, hey, this character will make people like me think weird things and do videos and do, ideas and things like that. And then they will all be wrong. But it is something to look at. I definitely would keep an eye on her since IMDb does have her listed in all 6 episodes. So I think her part will be much bigger than just being the judge at that one moment. So that's kind of how the show is shaped, the kind of things I saw that I thought were important that I think you should have known about. I really enjoyed the show. My personal review, I enjoyed it. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see where they take all of this. I expect, as I said, to see several Lokis from different timelines. Already, I think we've got 3. I don't know if we'll see more than that. Maybe at some point we'll see infinite Lokis, but they won't be any distinct people. They are definitely trying to bring Loki on as a sympathetic villain, making him the anti-hero. Take the villain, make him do something heroic to redeem himself. I think that's definitely where we're going here. I think my expectation is he is going to have some sort of conversation with each of these alternate Lokis, and he is going to learn something from each one, something about himself. Expect there to be someone worse hiding in the shadows. That's my thought. If it's not somebody worse, there's at least going to be somebody pulling the strings, more like the director of Sword in WandaVision. Maybe he's not the big bad, but he is a bad thing that needs to be dealt with at some point. So expect that to happen. I doubt that will be Kang. I doubt Kang will even show up in the show. But they are definitely hinting at him just by some of the things that are happening. Kang is the time-hopping villain, so the fact that we're even talking about time travel is part of Kang's world. Nightmare is unlikely to show up. I know, like I said, it was hinted at. We expect that to be the Doctor Strange villain. I don't see Nightmare showing up in this show at all. We'll probably see, just as we have, we'll see some more hints at him coming later, but not now. Maybe Mobius will be the bad guy at some point, or the Timekeepers themselves could be the bad guy. Now, I think that is realistic. I feel like less like Mobius, more like the Timekeepers are going to be some kind of villainous idea. We come to find out that what they are attempting to do is just not the right way. I could see that happening. I think the show is definitely worth watching. I don't recall hearing too many, curse words. We have a scene where there's, we see Hiddleston's chest, but, we don't see any nudity in these shows. They are on Disney Plus, so they've got some control there. I don't think we'll see anything worse than we saw or heard on Falcon and the Winter Soldier or on WandaVision. So pretty safe bet there. It really is going to be good. Now, I don't usually get into philosophy or theology here on the show, but I do want to point one thing out that appears to be part of what's going on in the Loki show. And it's called determinism. It's an idea that everything happens for a reason outside of your own personal will, meaning you think you do stuff because you have free will to do them, but in reality, it was what had to be done for other things to happen, and so you really never had free will in it. So it's an interesting idea. I think that some of the idea of what they're trying to do in Loki revolves around this idea, because Mobius says that Loki was born to cause suffering, death, and pain. It always was that way, and it always will be that way. And that it was so that others could become their best versions of themselves. So Loki being bad was actually a good thing for others, because him being there and being bad in the ways he was made other people better than they would have been. So it's an interesting idea. I think maybe that's some of the philosophy that's behind the show. Much like the other MCU shows on Disney Plus, I think Loki has a theme. And, WandaVision, I really feel like WandaVision was all about dealing with grief. That's what that show was about. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier was about living up to your name, or living up to your legend, living up to the expectations of what your mantle is. Now, I think the Loki theme is going to be truly knowing yourself. I think that's where they're going with this. It really feels that way. Knowing yourself is an ancient idea. It's been around for a long, long time. It's become very popular in modern times. But we as believers, we should know ourselves, but we should find our true identity in Christ. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget, you can find all of our social links, our online store, and our YouTube channel at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. And while you're there, click on the Support tab, check out our Patreon. We'd love to have you support us. Before we go, I do want to leave you with this blessing. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week. Blessings.